it would be not only tough for Canelo, but it would also affect Gennady Golovkin. And this is exactly what we are seeing now. Canelo Alvarez failing that drug test has screwed up all of Gennady Golovkin's plans. Now, naturally, you would think that if Golovkin can't get Canelo in the ring on May 5th, then he's just going to go right down the line of ranked opponents, right? Because that's how it would usually be done in any other sport. When you look at all of the competition at 160 right now, all of the elite mandatory challenges for Gennady Golovkin, fighters like Demetrius Andrade, fighters like Sergey Derevyanchenko, fighters like Danny Jacobs, Billy Joe Saunders, and the list just goes on and on, Jamal Charlo. So you're thinking, oh, he must be looking at one of these guys next, right? That's not the case. That is not even a thought for Gennady Golovkin. In fact, he's looking at names like Jaime Munguia. If I even pronounced that name right, that's the first time I've ever pronounced his last name. But apparently, Jaime Munguia is an opponent that Golovkin was looking at seriously to replace Canelo Alvarez. Now, Jaime, he is undefeated. He's 21 years old. He's never been on this level. He's never been on this stage, never even been close. And not only that, but he's not even ranked in any of the organizations when it comes to the top 15. Okay? So this is what I mean when I say you would think that Golovkin will go down from, if he can't get the number 1 ranked guy, he will go down to number 2, and then so on and so forth. That's not what Golovkin is attempting to do. So the other day there were talks that Golovkin, he was looking at Spike Sullivan, the Irish fighter. And then more recently, they started to hone in more on this Jaime guy from Mexico. Now, this pick was so ridiculous that Nevada State Athletic Commission, they had to step in and they rejected Jaime Munguia as an opponent for Gennady Golovkin. Why? Because the commission felt that was too much of a mismatch. Can you guys believe that? When the commission steps in and says, no, this is unfair, you know it's a serious mismatch. You know it, right? So once again, while Golovkin was attempting to fight a guy who's not even ranked in any of the organizations, has nowhere near the experience of a Charlo, of a Derevyanchenko, an Andrade, a Danny Jacobs, BJ Saunders, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. While Golovkin is interested in opponents like that, meanwhile, you have the top 3 contenders that are calling Golovkin out, and they're saying, I'm ready to step in and replace Canelo Alvarez as an opponent. Now keep in mind, guys, when Kell Brooks stepped up and when he said he'll fill in for Chris Eubanks, when those Eubanks negotiations went south, when Kell Brooks said, I'll take his place, Gennady Golovkin didn't hesitate to take the fight with Kell Brooks. Fast forward to present day, Gennady Golovkin is in the exact same situation. A big name opponent falls out or pulls out of the fight, and now you have some of the lions that are in the division saying, I'll go ahead and I'll replace him. I'll fill in for that guy. But when it comes to Demetrius Andrade and Sergey Derevyanchenko, once again, the top 3 contenders in the division, and Derevyanchenko, he's actually Golovkin's mandatory, okay? He's his mandatory. He's a Ukrainian fighter, undefeated, has a deep amateur pedigree. He won a bronze medal in the World Amateur Boxing Championships. So he's the real deal. That's a real fight that Gennady Golovkin would have on his hands. And skill, recognized skill, Gennady Golovkin, he understands that this will be a difficult fight. And then you have Demetrius Andrade, who's also raising his hand. He's willing to take the assignment for May 5th and fight Gennady Golovkin. Gennady Golovkin doesn't want to fight Andrade. He doesn't want to fight Darren Yemchenko. Golovkin wants to fight Spike Sullivan of Ireland. Or he wants to fight Jaime Munguia, or however you say his name. Now, some will try to defend Gennady Golovkin and say, hey, well, maybe Golovkin wants to fight this Jaime guy because he's from Mexico, and hey, after all, they are fighting on Cinco de Mayo, right? Well, you can't use that defense because Golovkin was also considering a fighter who's not from Mexico. In fact, a fighter who's from Ireland. And his name is, once again, Spike Sullivan. So we can't even use the excuse that he was just looking for a Mexican opponent. And if you can't use that excuse, that means Golovkin can fight against Andrade, he can fight against Darren Yemchenko, or any of the other elite fighters in his division. See, Golovkin has a serious dilemma right now because he's hoping that maybe he could get another big payday September, right? Now, I don't think Golovkin is considering Canelo. Maybe he is. Maybe Tom Loeffler wants Canelo. But they're trying to get an easier opponent right now to guarantee a bigger payday by the end of the year. But the problem with that is they're already obligated to put on a pay-per-view type of fight against a pay-per-view type of opponent May 5th. And you can't go from Canelo Alvarez to Jaime Munguia or Spike Sullivan. It's apples and oranges. It ain't even apples and oranges. It's apples and rocks, okay? You see, Canelo, he threw a hell of a monkey wrench in the program when he pulled out of this fight and failed positive for that clenbuterol test. Because now, HBO, once again, they're forced to put on a pay-per-view fight. Because they can't afford to put this fight on regular HBO. They need that pay-per-view money to fund more fights on the network. And this is why it seems like it would make a lot of sense for HBO. It would be in their best interest to put pressure on Golovkin and make him fight a top-notch opponent. And I think the biggest name opponent he could face to generate the most money would be Demetrius Andrade. I'll tell you why. Simply because I've been to almost all of Gennady Golovkin's fights, especially when he fought against fighters like Willie Monroe and when he fought against Dominic Wade. And I can tell you right now, when Golovkin fights against a black opponent, the fans are far more supportive, loyal. They come together just to support Gennady Golovkin. Even when Gennady Golovkin fought against Marco Antonio Rubio, a Mexican fighter, you had Mexican fans that were literally booing the Mexican fighter. They even had Triple G written on the Mexican flag, the fans that were cheering for Gennady Golovkin. So this is good for Golovkin. This suggests that Golovkin can fight Cinco de Mayo, and a lot of fans that support Canelo, they support Golovkin too. So they're going to come out and they're going to root for him. And once again, if he's fighting against a black fighter, race sells, guys. Race sells. There's no doubt about it, race sells. I mean, I will never forget the atmosphere at the Inglewood Forum when Golovkin was fighting Willie Monroe. You would have thought Gennady Golovkin was in the ring with Andre Ward. You would have thought he was in the ring with Andre Ward and Floyd Mayweather at the same damn time. That's how that crowd was cheering and rooting for Gennady Golovkin. And the celebration when he won was as if he had just knocked out Andre Ward. I BS you not, guys. I BS you not. I was there live for that one, covering that one. So my point is, hands down, this is a no-brainer. What fight is bigger? Golovkin versus Munguia or Golovkin versus Andrade? Even Golovkin versus Darren Yevchenko is bigger than this Jaime guy. I don't care if he's from Mexico and is Cinco de Mayo. That's not going to make a difference. That's not going to make a difference if people don't know who he is. Let me take you guys back down memory lane. You guys remember when Gennady Golovkin was saying that he'll beat anyone or he'll fight anyone from 154 to 168? And every once in a while, he would switch it up to even 175, right? Remember, this was at the time when Andre Ward was at 168. So when he made that challenge, Ward said, I'll fight you. So then Ward started to aggressively pursue a Gennady Golovkin fight, to no avail, obviously. In fact, Andre Ward didn't start dealing with backlash until he called out Gennady Golovkin. Fans were willing to do whatever they could do to protect Golovkin from Andre Ward. But it wasn't just the fans that were willing to protect Golovkin. Even HBO wanted to protect Gennady Golovkin. Because according to Ward's own trainer, Virgil Hunter, HBO, they forced Andre Ward to move up to a higher weight class to basically leave Golovkin alone and fight against the much tougher, bigger, stronger Sergey Kovalev. This is what HBO proposed. They gave Andre Ward, as Andre Ward put it, they gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. And he followed the money. He left Golovkin alone, went up top to a higher weight class to fight against Kovalev. HBO put that pressure on Ward to step up in competition. So my question, the reason why I bring all this up is, why doesn't HBO do this with Gennady Golovkin? This would seem like it would be the perfect time for HBO to say, enough is enough, Golovkin. Listen, we wanted the Canelo fight, that was big. Now you're going to go from fighting Canelo to fighting Jaime or Spike Sullivan? We want you to fight Demetrius Andrade. We want you to fight Danny Jacobs. We want you to fight someone on this level, or you don't fight on the network. How come HBO can't do that? How come HBO is not putting the same pressure on Golovkin as they put on Andre Ward? These are rhetorical questions. We know what time it is at the end of the damn day, don't we? So at the end of the day, Gennady Golovkin is going to continue to try opponents that even the commission deems as mismatch opponents, while you have fighters like Darren Yevchenko, who's his number one contender, number one mandatory, and you have fighters like Demetrius Andrade that have raised their hands for the assignment. In fact, there's a lot more pressure being put on Golovkin because now Darren Yevchenko's promoter, Lou DiBella, he's requesting to have Golovkin stripped if he doesn't fight the mandatory. Because the way these belts operate is they're pretty much going in a rotation. So, for example, you had Danny Jacobs, who was the mandatory for the WBA belt. You had Canelo, that was supposed to be some kind of mandatory for the WBC belt. You had, what's his name, Dominic Wade, who was a mandatory for one of Golovkin's belts about 2 years ago. And now you have Darren Yevchenko. Now it's his turn. So it makes all the sense in the world for him to be facing Golovkin next if Canelo pulled out, who was another mandatory or number one contender, whatever he was. But Golovkin let him pick his opponent. He would rather fight a guy that's not even in the top 15. How does that make any sense? You have to understand, when you are the champion, the unified champion, there is no such thing as, let me take this soft touch and then maybe I'll fight a tougher opponent towards the end of the year. You are the unified middleweight champion. You're supposed to be ready to take on all challenges, and especially the number one contenders to the belts you're holding. So this is not adding up at all. And in fact, Golovkin, his situation reminds me of Manny Pacquiao's situation. It kind of reminds me of Manny Pacquiao's situation because Manny Pacquiao, he used to be in a situation where he had so much, it was easy for him to avoid the most dangerous opponent. For example, if you had Bob Arum pressuring Pacquiao to take the Terrence Crawford fight, Manny Pacquiao will say, oh, you know what? I'll fight Bradley a third time, right? Then Bob Arum says in his next fight, I want you to fight Terrence Crawford. Then Pacquiao says, you know what? I'm gonna fight Jesse Vargas. He always had about 3 or 4 opponents to choose from. So he never had to fight the toughest opponent, right? And then it got to the point to where all of the opponents were tough. And then it was really nowhere for Pacquiao to go. When Pacquiao lost to Jeff Horn, that really screwed him up. Because then he realized, and Jeff Horn was another opponent he thought would be an easy touch, a soft touch. He thought that he could turn down the Terrence Crawford fight for the third time. Instead, he would fight Jeff Horn. That backfired. He ended up losing to Jeff Horn. And then he had to contemplate coming back and fighting Jeff Horn in a rematch. Now Jeff Horn is no longer a soft touch. Now he's a threat because Pacquiao has already lost to him. So now Pacquiao has 2 tough choices. Do I fight Terrence Crawford or do I fight the guy that I just lost to who could possibly beat me a second time? And then if he beats me a second time, it makes it a lot more difficult to cry robbery in the first fight. So Pacquiao, he understood all these intangibles, and what he decided to do was not fight either one of them, and instead fight Lucas Matisse. But what's happening with Manny Pacquiao is it's starting to make him look bad. But with Manny Pacquiao's situation, at least he's towards the end of his career. He's already, a Hall of Famer and all that good stuff. He's already won a whole bunch of titles in different weight classes. So the situation is a little bit different with Manny compared to Gennady Golovkin. It's a lot worse for Gennady Golovkin because he's in his prime. And this is the first time Gennady Golovkin has had nothing but sharks and lions in his division. There was a time when, once again, his number one mandatories were people like Willie Monroe, Dominic Wade. Marco Antonio Rubio wasn't even a mandatory. But these were the type of opponents he was facing before. Now you have fighters like Charlo, Jacobs, Darren Yevchenko, BJ Saunders. And the list just, it goes on and on and on. Andrade, right? So you have all of these fighters that deserve a shot, and Gennady Golovkin wants to fight Jaime. He wants to fight Sullivan. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to make Golovkin look really bad. If Golovkin does not fight a top-level elite fighter, it's going to make him look real bad. And I'll close out with saying this, because there was rumors before that he was even talking about fighting against Gilberto Ramirez, which would be a good fight. That would be a worthy opponent if he were to move up to 168 and fight Gilberto Ramirez. I don't think he's going to do that. I hope he does that. I hope that HBO, they force him to fight an opponent on that level. But still, the fact that Golovkin, at one point, he was the only kid in the park playing. He had no kids to play with. Now he has all type of kids to play with at the park, right? My point is, now he has competition. Before he didn't have competition. So it wouldn't make any sense to now move up to 168 if now you have kids to play with in your own division. Now, when it would have made sense to move up to 168, when there were no kids to play with at 160, when the best competition you had was Adama and Rubio and Monroe, that's when it made sense to move up in weight, right? Shane Mosley moved up in weight because Oscar De La Hoya was there. Pound for pound, the best at the time. Or top 3, one of the best at the time. Roberto Duran moved up in weight because Sugar Ray Leonard was there. But if you already have the Sugar Ray Leonard in your division, then it's not that much of an urgency to move up. So let's see what HBO does. Let's see what the sport of boxing does. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. What's going on, y'all? Brooklyn, New York. It's going down. We out here for the Wilder versus Ortiz fight. It should be a great fight. Once again, I'm loving it out here.